Alright folks, this is what I call a flipped lecture. What I try to do is give you just some quick key points on a specific idea so that we have more time in class to ask and answer questions. So on your American Hybrid Begins assignment, if you're down on this third point that says Geography is Destiny Notes, what I want to cover here is why it seems like when the Native Americans and the Europeans got into arguments or fights or wars, that the Europeans seem to almost always have an advantage. And we want to realize that it's not because the Native Americans weren't trying hard or that they weren't smart or that the Europeans were somehow better, but that there were some things outside of everyone's control that gave the Europeans some advantage. So geography is destiny is this idea that where you live has a big impact on who you are. That's why for this first picture I put together 4 different pictures of people or places or things where the place that you're from has a big impact on who you become. So if you're looking at your assignment, number 3, where it has all these never statements, I want to go over some things that the Native Americans never had a chance to work with or never had a chance to learn about simply because of where they're from. The first one has to do with animals. Native Americans in North America never had animals that they could domesticate. Now the word domesticate means get animals to listen and work with humans. Domesticated is the opposite of wild animals. Almost nowhere in North America are there animals, naturally, that you can train to help humans. Llamas are about the only ones. You have big animals like these oxen, and other animals have all come from Europe. So the Europeans had the advantage of having these animals. Why is this important? Well, if you have domesticated animals to do work, that frees humans up to do other things. Domesticated animals do work, so humans can do other things. Second thing that Native Americans had no chance at. Native Americans in North America never had an easy way to dig up minerals to make metal. What do I mean by that? Well, even today in North America, if we want to dig up minerals to make metal, we have to build these enormous mines with huge holes and enormous trucks. Look at this huge hole at a strip mine. You might have seen these if you ever spent any time in northern Minnesota. But you can imagine in the year 1600, nobody was ready to build a mine like this. In Europe, mines don't have to dig very deep because it just so happens that the minerals are nearer to the surface. Why is this important? Once you have metal, making tools is a lot easier, it's a lot more effective, and it lasts longer if you have a tool made out of metal. The Native Americans, it wasn't that they weren't smart enough to make metal, it was that here in North America, it's very hard to find the minerals necessary. Here's another thing the Native Americans never had. They never had wheat to grow in North America. Wheat just didn't exist. You might say, who cares? Well, wheat is a crop that's pretty easy as far as growing things goes. Pretty easy, and you can feed a lot of people if you have wheat. Why is that important? Native Americans had to work a lot harder to eat without wheat, and the Europeans could plant some wheat, and then they had free time, or they could have other people work on other things. And finally, Native Americans in North America never lived with domesticated animals. That's what we were talking about earlier, these big animals that can do work like oxen or horses or cows. They didn't really exist in North America. And that's important because they didn't get exposed to all these weird animal diseases because the Native Americans weren't living near large animals. And you might say, well, that doesn't sound like a bad deal. But what happened was The Europeans, because they lived around these domesticated animals and got all these weird diseases, that's why I have that picture down there in the corner to remind you of the Black Death, fleas on rats from 9th grade, when all those people, 1/3 of Europe's population, died from these weird diseases, in large part because they lived in cramped areas with lots of domesticated animals. And when the Europeans showed up, they had in their body all these weird animal diseases, and the Native Americans, their bodies were totally not ready for these diseases because they'd never lived around animals. So millions of Native Americans died before they even saw a European, because the diseases could spread once the Europeans arrived in North America. So a quick review on all these disadvantages the Native Americans had simply because of where they were born. They never had large animals to do work for them. They never had an easy way to make tools out of metal. They never had food like wheat that was easy to plant. And because they didn't have those domesticated animals, their bodies weren't ready for all these weird diseases. So if it seems like the Europeans have a big advantage sometimes when they get together and go against the Native Americans, it's important to remember that a lot of it was outside of the Native Americans' control. Now make sure you finish these other 2 sections on your own, and please ask me questions, because I get paid money to help, and I like to help you. Thanks.